This is Talk Easy. I'm Sam Fragoso. Welcome to the show. Seth Rogen.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
I have something in my mouth every time you try to speak to me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
How do you feel around this time, about to put something out into the world?
I mean, it all depends. It's in some ways it's already out in the world, in that we premiered at South by Southwest,
Right.
and but I either feel really bad or pretty good or somewhere in the middle. And right now I feel pretty good. So on the grand scale of my spectrum, that's like on the very positive end of the spectrum. And I'm very proud of the show. I love that. It's always easy when you genuinely, like the thing that you are generally talking about as you're promoting a thing. And as it comes out, you're happy about it. And people have started to see it. So I know in general, the response is good. So that also, this would be I probably wouldn't be here, honestly, if the response was very bad, I would imagine.
You would have canceled on us?
I probably would. I probably would have canceled everything, I would imagine. Yeah.
No, just cancel Talk Easy.
Yeah, exactly.
We know how difficult the questions are. I heard you want to say that people crave stories because what stories do is organize experiences in ways that help them make sense of them. I'm curious, did you arrive at this show, the studio, in an attempt to make sense of the last decade you've had in this industry?
No, I don't think we assumed we would ever make sense of any of it. And I think it was helpful. It was fun to make something that was very personal, that specifically begged us to really analyze our lives and our
nonsense.
Exactly. And our jobs and, art in general and commerce in general and the relationship between the two. And so in some ways, it probably was like a contextualizing experience and something that, I think the fact that it was so much based on our real lives, it was, sometimes you need an excuse to really dive into things. And so it was a good excuse to really dive into our jobs and what frustrates us about them and what inspires us about them. And the thing we constantly were asking ourselves was just how do we feel about all this? We felt like that need to come across on the show. And it was incumbent on us to have a pretty specific opinion on that, And so that was something that it really forced us to sort of develop an opinion or articulate our opinion on all this, which is not something that I had necessarily done,
You hadn't done that up until that point.
Yeah, not in a holistic, kind of overall way, I don't think. Yeah.
So now that you have, what does that sound like?
Well, what I've realized is that I'm very actually I'm someone who's been given a great life by this industry and who has been allowed to kind of live their dreams and in general,
that will be the title of the podcast, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Seth Rogen, decidedly good life.
Yes, exactly. It's true. And
decidedly charmed man enters room.
And there are things that are very frustrating about our jobs and things that have a lot of conflict, and inherently, that is at the core of Hollywood is this conflict between art and commerce. And so that's a part of it. But overall, we feel like it's an industry that it's hard to be too hard on it when it's given us so much. And so we are lovers of the industry because we've gotten a lot of great things from it, but we are also at times very frustrated by it and very aggravated and stressed out and panicked over the specifics of it,
I noticed when you say aggravated and stressed out, you keep pointing to me.
Yes, exactly. No, I'm pointing. I gesture in general. I gestured outwardly. I have
aggravated.
I have a projective gesture
and stressed out. You project outward, but not inward.
It's just the directions my hands are flinging.
Won't take it personally. No, but I did. You guys haven't. You and Evan have not directed a movie since The Interview.
No. We haven't.
And it's it's a little over a decade.
Uh-huh.
You've done some TV stuff.
Yeah.
But I would say this show is about as cinematic of a thing as you guys have ever directed.
Yeah.
So the frustrations of the last decade, how did you begin to put them into this program?
I mean, by really kind of drilling down on what we find to be aggravating and frustrating.
And why don't you do
as I gesture to you more, which is...
Let's do a power ranking of those things.
I mean, and there are things that, like, I think I'm more at peace with in many ways than my character on the show, but, like, you know, there's always an existential crisis in Hollywood, kind of, because at its core, it is a conflicted industry. Like, if, you know, and it is art and commerce trying to coexist, as opposed to, like, the finance world, which is commerce trying to exist with no restrictions or limitations to it. You know what I mean? And because of that, the different things are winning at different times, basically. And I think it feels like you look back to the 70s, and I think it would be like art was winning more then,
right.
You know what I mean? And commerce was following, and movies were doing very well, but they were also great movies. And then, you know, things swing in a direction where streamers come into play and studios start to panic a little bit, and they start to maybe not believe in themselves as much, and they start to, you know, perhaps want to mitigate their risk because they feel like maybe their job is even more unstable because of this seismic thing that's happening below their feet, you know?
But even the age of comedy that you came up in and developed,
the
movies were good and they made a lot of money.
Yes, and exactly. Like we participated in it, you know, and so
some would say you even benefited.
We very much did. We benefited a lot from it, you know, and so
everyone's a homeowner.
Yes, we saw firsthand how those specific movies became much harder to make, and not to say we didn't. You know, we made Good Boys and Blockers and things
which made money.
Yeah, which did well and ticked a lot of those boxes, you know, and for us, I think why, you know, we are not miserable people is we recognize, like, oh, if we want to keep putting movies in theaters, like, we should make Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and we should make sure we're able to make it in the exact way we want and able to make something that we really creatively are passionate about, but we understand the parameters of the shifting industry, you know what I mean? And it's not something that and we're like, we can do television because that, I think, as much as film has contracted in many ways as far as what people will make, television has expanded in many ways as far as what people will make. And so we view that as a real opportunity, you know what I mean?
I think you have a character on the show, maybe a doctor, who says, oh, I don't go to the movies anymore, but TV, oh my God.
If you want real art, you watch television.
Do you feel that way?
No, I go to the movies, but I do think they are both very artful, and I do understand that a lot of people do feel that way, and a lot of people have kind of given up on movies.
Post-pandemic especially. Exactly,
which is another joke we make in the show is like, you know, I'm in the movie since Barbenheimer, basically, which is like a thing I think a lot of people, you know, a lot of people feel that way, but then at the same time, movies do great, and great movies still do great. And I think that's something that we constantly have to respect and remind ourselves. Like Inside Out 2 is the biggest movie of the year. Like it's a beautiful film, you know what I mean? And so to say that, and these movies can still be very culturally impactful, you know, and not just you know, things that only film fans love. I think they do still cross over into like the general culture of the world, you know what I mean? And so Deadpool and Wolverine is a perfect example, you know. And so I think a lot of people feel that way, and I think in our darkest moments we feel as though that is perhaps the way things are going, which is no one cares about movies anymore, movies are dead. But I actually think that people still do.
We'll get back around to the darkest moments later.
Great.
We usually like to save that for Act 3 of the podcast.
I like their acts.
You're jumping the gun a little bit. It's okay. You know, this show, the studio, is explicitly set in a post-Barbenheimer world.
Very much so.
The character you play, Matt Remick, talks about capitalizing on the Barbie phenomenon.
Yes.
And in turn becomes obsessed with turning the Kool-Aid Man into a, I mean, we hope franchise.
Yeah,
I mean,
but a prestigious franchise.
Of course, as I mean,
as some are,
and everyone knows Kool-Aid and prestige they just go hand in hand.
It's an organic.
They just go hand in hand.
It's an organic goal to have. Yeah.
The studio is called Continental.
Yeah,
and it feels Paramount-like. It's not a streaming service.
It's supposed to be like a legacy studio, as they call them. Yeah,
and in that, in the name of Paramount, your character Matt is obsessed with the age of Robert Evans.
Yes, very much so.
Who directed who produced The Godfather and Chinatown.
Yeah.
I said directed because a part of him definitely believes he directed.
He probably, if you asked him, he helped.
Yeah. So tell me about, like, the show seems to be at the intersection of the Larry Sanders Show, The Player, and a little bit of Veep.
Yeah. That's exactly what they're known for.
Really?
So that's great.
You know what? Interview's done. I think that's it. I think we got it.
Yeah. No, we were first and foremost influenced by the Larry Sanders Show. And that's like me and Evan, who grew up together, and the creator and my co-director and writer. That was on when we were like in high school, and we were obsessed with it in high school. And we would watch it all the time. And
even at house parties, I heard you would sneak up.
We would like be in the parents' bedroom at a house party watching Larry Sanders Show as all of our friends were getting drunk in the basement, which really speaks to who we are, you know? And so we loved it. And then when I moved to LA, I kind of, Judd and Pete and Alex were actually, I've known them since I came out, and they had all worked on the Larry Sanders Show. Right. And Gary was sort of this like patriarchal figure in the group that I fell in. And I got to help write jokes for the Emmys when he was hosting in 2000 or 99 or something like that, you know? And he was like just a real influence on the whole like comedic group that I fell in. So he was always really inspirational. And that was one of the first thing I remember. I mean, it's Bob Saget in like the first joke of the whole show. And he could not have been more to me at that age of someone who I viewed as one thing. And then the show showed me a joke that portrayed him as the exact opposite thing as I thought he was. And it's one of those jokes I just like never forgot. It was like always one of the funniest kind of rug pulls that I'd seen. And it really felt real. And it really felt like I was being shown what it was like behind the curtain. But also it was a very human show. Like it was just about like a sad guy trying not to humiliate himself, which I also related to.
To tell you the truth, I didn't even need to be there for the fucking Saget interview.
Good show.
All I said was, hi, Bob, bye, Bob. I could have been working at a Jack in the Box.
Oh, don't diminish yourself. Anyone with less talent would have tried to interrupt you.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. It just seems to me... Oh, Bob.
Did I go on too long? Was I rambling or anything?
Absolutely not. You were great. Love your work, Bob.
Yeah, I love the one where the man gets hit in the nuts with a wiffle ball. Anytime.
Come back anytime, Bob.
Thanks.
Sure.
Is that how you see your character, Matt?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, in a lot of ways, he has a tragic job, I think, and I think his personality makes it even more tragic. And we talked a lot about that as we were writing the show, is like, how do we make a character that has like a fundamentally comedic conflict at play, which is, you know, he loves movie stars, but they don't want to talk to him, and he loves directors and he has to break their heart, and he loves movies and he has to make them work. He doesn't have to, but he's constantly making the choice whether or not to, you know, and at his own peril, you know. And so that and the Larry Sanders Show is similar in a lot of ways, where he's so technically like a high status character, but you always feel really bad for him, you know.
You said that the job that Matt has, the studio executive or the studio head, is a tragic job.
Yeah.
And in the process of making this program, you interviewed a bunch of studio executives.
Yeah. It's not a tragic job for all of them, but for a lot of them.
That's why I want to ask you. So, like a Ted Sarandos.
Yeah. It's not tragic for him.
Yes.
I didn't interview him specifically, but he's someone I've known for a very long time and have talked to a lot about his job over the years. Yeah.
So who describes it as tragic? And who has a sense of humor about it?
I think the higher you ascend, the less tragic you think it is, basically. And I think the lower on the ladder you are, the more tragic you think it is. And the tragedy probably dissipates as you ascend, you know?
You mean as you ascend further and further from other people?
Yes, exactly. From having to feel the influence of their emotions.
Something approximating emotion and feeling and human tension.
You insulate yourself from all that.
I heard that's what you're trying to do as well these days.
Actively, on a moment-to-moment basis. But
I'm glad you didn't point to me on that.
But it really, I think, the ones who actually get to make the choice as to what movies get made and which ones don't, they they have a less, they feel very empowered, and it's a power they wield. The ones who are constantly right outside that are the ones who have a more tragic job, because not only are they, caught between art and commerce in a very direct way every single day, but they're kind of dealt a hand and have to live with it. They don't even get to be the ones that are actually pulling the trigger on which way to go. They're the ones who have to tell the director that they're making their movie dumber, and they don't even want to be the ones doing it. And it wasn't even their idea. They just are like mouthpieces for the people above them. And that's very tragic, especially when you love movies,
In your experience, are most studio executives artists in hiding?
They might say that. I think most studio executives love movies. And I think that's actually like a big misconception, is that people think people who work at studios are just like money, only care about money. And the truth is, there's like so many other industries you can go into where if you only care about money, and there's so much easier ways to make money if that is your goal than to make movies.
Betting on Knocked Up is a very...
exactly. Yeah, go work in finance. You know what I mean? There's a whole industry dedicated to just making money.
Yeah.
And so I find that most of the studio executives that I interact with genuinely love movies and genuinely view themselves as contributive to movies when they're doing their jobs well, and subtractive to movies when they are forced to compromise. And there is an echelon of people who does actually, and there are people who actually don't care about movies in Hollywood, and they're more at like the CEO level, I find. Like the people who kind of are running the parent companies that you don't interact with that much, and they're not the ones really choosing which movies get made, but the people who do choose are responsible to report to those people, you know what I mean? And they're scary figures because they are involved in the movie industry, but actually are not movie lovers,
Increasingly, tech companies have, including Apple, have gotten into the movie business.
Yes.
And I think that has been a fear for many people, which is these are tech people, not film people.
Yeah, but they mostly hire film people to run their divisions,
So you think that's kind of overblown?
I do. Yeah. Like I think there is, again, it's always shifting and moving and everything's always evolving. So like, I think that it is, and it's always scary when things change. So I get why people are inherently scared of the tech world, especially in general, not one with traditionally the best track record, but what I found is,
by the way, spoken like someone who was in the Steve Jobs movie.
Yeah, exactly. But we deal with traditional places and less traditional places as far as how long they've been around in
so you don't
Hollywood
discriminate.
Goes. No, and I don't find that big a difference, honestly. Like at times you feel it. At times you feel like, oh, like this company makes its money selling toilet paper to people. So then maybe these creative things are not as important to them as they are a place that only deals in creative things. But in general, no, like we've been incredibly creatively empowered by tech companies, and we've been incredibly creatively stifled by traditional studios in the past. And so I'd say it's a good combo of both.
I'm curious, like with the industry contracting in the way that it is right now, in the show, there are jokes about DEI initiatives going out the window, like the acceleration of AI. The show is coming off a historic double labor strike.
Yeah.
I think the sentiment around studio executives, I would say charitably, is not sentimental.
No, not at all.
But you and Evan, because the writing is strong and compelling, offer the character of Matt and his colleagues a degree of empathy. Like you are coming from a place of trying to understand.
Yeah.
I'm curious, after the past couple years in Hollywood, did you feel a push to be more critical of the industry, to be like more pointed in the satire?
No, I'd say that was always something that was interesting to us. If anything, I think over the last few years, we've found optimism that maybe was unexpected, like,
yeah, where did you find that?
Well, like Barbenheimer is actually a great example. Is we started writing the show like during COVID, basically. So like when we were writing the show initially, it was like, there was a real sense of like, maybe this will all go away, you know? And
You're on the couch. You're on the couch watching Larry Sanders.
Exactly. And like, maybe we were a part of the last heaves of Hollywood, you know?
Maybe The Interview is our last movie.
Exactly. And then COVID ended, and people were like, okay, will movies ever...
Some people believe COVID never began.
What a luxury. But, you know...
Sorry.
I incidentally, that was a good time. Let's talk about that for a while, actually. You know, after the pandemic, as we were writing the show, Barbenheimer happens. And there's a moment where, like, movies are not only incredibly successful, but they occupy culture in a way that I think people thought was never going to happen ever again, maybe. And maybe
as an actor, did you feel like sort of slighted by the fact that you didn't get the role of Ken or
Barbie
or Oppenheimer
any of them? There was a moment where I was like, am I the only Caucasian actor not in Oppenheimer? Where I was a little, I'm like, you got Benny Safdie and David Krumholtz. There's not one more Jew around at that time.
I can't believe they couldn't fit you in.
You know, Nolan, someone who I've never met in my life, and I have no reason to believe he wants to work with me in any way. But no, they filled out the cast nicely.
He's a big listener of the show, so
I would hope.
Yeah,
no, it was actually like it forced us to reimagine our entire perspective around Hollywood in many ways, which is that it is still possible, and you can still do it. And that's almost what's more frustrating at times, is that there's this, like, you know, golden ring that is still dangling in front of you of like, oh, maybe I can be the person that, like, saves Hollywood. And that, and that's like something that I think studio executives genuinely feel. And it's because it's happened. Like, Hollywood is an industry that was markedly affected by singular people, you know what I mean? Like, George Lucas completely changed the course of the industry. Steven Spielberg completely changed the course of the industry. And Robert Evans completely changed the course of the industry. Ted Sarandos completely changed the course of the industry. Like, and a lot of people want to be that person. And that was something that we thought, you know, that weekend showed us how much that was still possible. And it was a great thing for the character, because we were like, oh, that, like, my character should be someone who's very inspired and who genuinely delusionally thinks they can be the person to save Hollywood, you know?
So with all of that optimism, all of that belief in self, Matt gets the job of studio head.
Instantly sells out.
And early on in the first episode of the show, once installed in the new position, he goes to visit his mentor, played by Catherine O'Hara.
Why
don't we play a clip from that?
Oh, you poor thing. You have to kill Martin Scorsese's movie. I killed one of Warren's movies in '88, and he never slept with me again.
I have the same fear with Marty.
So, how do you feel in all this?
You know, I've worked obviously a long time to get here. My parents are very thrilled, very proud. I think Griffin is, optimistic with the plan.
Maddie, not one of those words is about how you feel.
Yeah, I feel miserable, honestly. I'm anxious, I'm stressed out, panicking pretty much all the time. I was so much happier 2 weeks ago when I was just angry and resentful that I didn't have this job. I would give anything to be angry and resentful compared to how I feel right now. I walk past the tour guide every morning, and they say that the office was built as a temple to cinema, but it feels much more like a tomb.
Heavy as the head, Maddie.
Yeah, I'm honored, obviously, to be one of the people that gets to choose, which movies get made and which ones don't. That's huge. And I got into all this because, I love movies, but now I have this fear that my job is to ruin them.
The job is a meat grinder.
I got into this job because I love the movies, and now I feel like it's my job to ruin them.
Yeah.
That was something that was told to you and Evan.
Yeah.
In 2000, right?
Yeah, we were getting notes on a screenplay we were writing that never got made, and yeah, the executive was kind of clearly caught in this exact conflict where he had kind of he knew what his bosses were expecting of this script, and he knew the direction that he thought was better for it, and he knew that those two things were at odds, and he was doing the thing that would not get him fired. And he was telling us to change things that he himself didn't believe we should change. And then, yes, he hung his head and said, I got into this because I love movies, and now it's my job to ruin them. And I think it made us really understand, that yeah, like a lot of these studio executives do love movies and are genuinely at conflict. And something that was said to me very early on, probably by Judd or someone, was like, it's, like they call it show business for a reason. And those two things have to coexist. And it's not show, but it's not business. Like it's show business and they are the two heads of this,
That does sound like Judd Apatow.
Exactly. And so it that's something that I always, these were like the things being instilled with us when we were like early on in our career. And so I think it was helpful, but it made us very sympathetic to the people we were dealing with. And as producers and writers, like you interact with studio executives a lot. And so I think the more you understand where they're coming from, the better all those interactions are. And we always viewed them as people who wanted generally to do right by us and by the creative world at large, but they just. You
think in your experience, most of them wanted to do right by you?
I think on a person to person basis, the executives, that I interact with want to be making things better and are constantly having to weigh whether or not that might get them fired.
The first time you received notes from someone that was paying you.
Yeah.
Was around the age of 13.
Yeah, probably. Moyle.
You're in Vancouver, where you had been hired to write material for a Moyle.
Yeah.
Which obviously, who hasn't?
Yes, who hasn't? As many comedic writers begin their path.
And podcasters, that's how it works.
Exactly.
Before podcasting, it's bids for Moyle.
You were Moyle writing.
I was Moyle writing. That is the name of my memoir, too.
I was Moyle writing.
Before we get to the punchlines that you wrote, can you set up the story for us?
Yeah, I was. I started doing stand-up comedy when I was like 13.
Your mother would drive you to clubs.
My mother would drive me to shows, and after a show, when I was 13 or 14, I was approached by a Moyle, and the Moyle explained to me that he wanted to.
You seem almost embarrassed telling this story.
I'm still in shock that it's true because it seems crazy, and I'm still.
It's in this book.
It's in the book, and I'm still amazed that a Moyle had and I get why, like, that the Moyle had the instinct of, like, I should be funnier up there.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's such a funny and a very specifically Jewish thought to have as well, is like, I should put people at ease with humor, but humor's such a risky thing, and if it goes bad, you've done the opposite of put people at ease. You know what I mean?
Do you think he turned to a kid for help?
Because I was closer to the age of the people being circumcised.
Because he was working on kids.
It was kid material. No, I think it's probably because he thought I was cheaper, I would imagine. And I was good enough. Like, I think he weighed economy and quality, art and commerce.
Wow, even then. They don't call it business.
Exactly. It's show business. And I was at the cross section. And so, he
offers you $500.
Yeah. Well, no, he says he'll pay me like $50 a joke.
Okay.
That he likes, which is you don't want to do that. That's a tough thing to get into. It's like, so I got to write like 50 jokes and maybe I'm only getting paid for 10 of them.
Right.
And I write all these Moyle jokes. My friends thought for sure I was going to be murdered and molested, maybe. I don't know in which order, but they thought I was insane for going and hanging out with this Moyle who would pick me up from school in his, like, Ferrari, like the most, like, kid alluring car you could possibly imagine. And I remember my friends just watching me get in this Moyle's car, being like, we're never going to see you again.
Yeah. It was weird when he offered you a Snickers bar.
Exactly. But no, to the contrary, he just offered me some less money than I would have, less than I would have hoped for the jokes that I had written.
So you're at the diner.
We're at White Spot, which is a Canadian restaurant chain. Yeah.
Free advertisement here.
Yep.
So you show him the jokes.
I show him the jokes, yeah.
And he likes a few of them. I have some of them here if you want to read them for the audience.
Sure. I was a child. This was a joke where, yes, he would gesture to the kid he's circumcising and say, he's going to be the coolest dude in preschool. How many kids his age can say they survived a knife fight?
That's good.
This is a very Canadian specific joke. I used to work in Winnipeg, but I had to move to Vancouver. You see, there's not a lot of work for a boil who shivers uncontrollably. That's speaking to your base audience, which is Canadians who know it's cold in Winnipeg. Give it up for our musical act, the Slice Girls.
Yeah, that one's tough.
That's not a great. That's a timely one.
Yeah.
Now give me a moment as I oil up the chainsaw. That was
pretty good.
That was that.
All right, do one more. Your favorite of them. Again, for 13, 14, these are pretty solid.
Not bad. The only problem with being a boil is you get used to the ceremony. Last night I found myself going through a half-hour service before I cut a carrot for my salad. It's a little sweaty. It's a long walk, but maybe he got there.
Hey, no, it's about the destination.
Exactly.
No, it's about the journey. So he negotiated with you.
Yes.
Saying, I'm only going to pay for some of these.
For the jokes I like.
And you as a teenager,
yes,
say what?
I think I said you got to pay me for all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a teen, like I read that story in your book.
Yeah.
I guess I was struck by the fact, like, the gumption of you as a teenager going, I'm going to negotiate with this grown man who is trying to cheat me out of some money.
Yeah.
Like, you held your ground.
I did. I really wanted money. I was only doing it for money. I knew this was not like a career longevity play. I wasn't going to be writing boil jokes for the rest of my life. So I couldn't extract what I needed from him at that moment. It was all for nothing. So, yeah. And I don't pick a kid up in a fucking Ferrari and then cheap out on paying him for his jokes, for God's sakes. Like, come on.
Did he make you split the bill at the diner?
No, I walked out of there. I was like, I'm not even going to wait for this bill. I'm going home.
So that in that period, like you and Evan are buddies.
Yep.
You guys watch American Pie. Go, I don't know. This is not representative of our.
It wasn't
experience.
American Pie. American Pie actually came out later. Well, once we were already writing Superbad. It was some other high school movie.
Right.
Yeah.
But it just didn't feel like your high school.
No.
And you two thought, we could write this.
Yeah. We were like, let's try to write a movie based on our experience in high school, basically.
I guess my question is, every teenager says that.
Do they?
Every teenager is like, oh, this movie sucks. We could do a better thing.
We actually did it.
You actually did it.
So most of those teenagers don't actually sit down and write a whole
I know.
movie.
So that's what I want to hold here with you. Where did the confidence come from to do it?
It was sort of like a mixture of confidence and like delusion and like, I was doing stand-up at the time.
Right.
And I was doing stand-up with adults who made their living doing stand-up. And I would start to tell jokes that were like some of the things that became like scenes in Superbad, basically, you know? And about wanting to hook up with girls and trying to buy beer and stuff like that. And I saw that like it was really landing and that people really seemed to be like connecting with our like very lived in version of what it was like to be in high school. And so like there was like encouraging things, I guess, where we were like sort of led to believe like people like this, like maybe this could work. And we also were big fans of like independent film. And at that time was really when like Clerks and Rushmore and you know, we were big Sam Raimi fans and we loved, you know, like very cheap movies. And so we were like, worst comes to worst, like we could just make this, like we can just make it ourselves. Like we should write a movie that's set like on the street and in houses and in places that are easily accessible. And if no one else wants to make it, then we'll just make it, you know? And so that was also a part of it, is like, we weren't writing like some alien epic. Like we were writing something that was like very obtainable, we thought. We were wrong. It took a very long time to get the movie made. But that was really like, our thought process was like, we might as well try, you know?
Well, when you land the part on Freaks and Geeks,
yeah,
you go to Los Angeles and Judd becomes a kind of mentor to you. We were talking about notes earlier.
Yeah.
And I wondered that moment after you had made the show, after you had acted in the show.
Yeah.
And the network is giving notes back to Judd
Yeah.
on Freaks and Geeks.
Yes.
Would he let you into the room to listen to the notes process?
Yeah, he would let me like listen in on the calls. And that
Okay.
was actually another one of the like building blocks for the show, was something I always remembered, is he was like, we were like about to get on a notes call, and he was like, what you have to remember is all these people are at like a 10 out of 10 panic all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they feel, rightfully so, that anything they say or do in any moment might end their entire careers, basically.
But you were 16
Yeah.
in that room hearing grown-ups
Yeah.
litigate,
They didn't sound like grown-ups.
Sorry. and they never did.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's like, the conversations are so silly, and that's what's like a funny part of the show, is like the stakes are high, but the specifics are ridiculous.
Right.
And everything is imbued with this like real life or death, with these stakes, because in a way it is for these people. But the conversations are like, should they be smoking weed in this scene? Make sure they're drinking out of those red cups. Oh, you say beer. Can you not say beer? Like, it was literally like those kinds of conversations for Freaks and Geeks. And it was like, you make this joke about Nixon. Does do kids still know who Richard Nixon is? Like, it was all stuff like that, where it was like,
Well, did you?
I know. And so it was funny to, again, like, it was impassioned, and it was, tense, but like the conversation itself was very silly by a lot of
I just
stuff.
so do you think, maybe this is silly, but like, I think when people hear the description of a 16-year-old being invited into the room, into a notes process environment, I think a lot of 16-year-olds maybe wouldn't be great at absorbing,
or wouldn't want to have anything to do with it, probably.
But to you, did you go, oh, I could do this? This is interesting to me.
Oh yeah, I already wanted to do it, and Judd saw that, and I would actively,
the way Shandling saw Judd early on when he was a kid,
and he started when he was very young. So I think the fact that I was young was in no way like, he really didn't view me as like a novelty. He saw that I was really dedicated to this and really wanted to do it, and so he was like outwardly instructive, and went out of his way to sort of mentor me and usher me through the specifics of how the industry works, and because that had happened with him, and so I would write scenes for Freaks and Geeks and try to get them on the show. I would pitch episode ideas, like, and I had already written Superbad. I was still working on it, but like there was a draft of it, so I think he also saw that like I had completed a screenplay.
That you and Evan are serious.
Yeah, that we weren't like, it wasn't like a joke to us. That like we really wanted to do this.
There were some jokes, but
only dick jokes.
All right, so you moved to Los Angeles, and then you drop out of high school.
Uh-huh.
Before you do that, there is an excerpt from a high school yearbook that I wanted you to read.
Oh, no.
Of you at about 16, 17.
This is legitimately embarrassing.
Getting... Which...
It is a joke, but it's not a joke that is
This is the most red you've been in this whole interview.
Yes, it's actually embarrassing.
I hope you know, and I hope it's clear by now.
Yeah.
It is coming from a place of love.
Oh, I understand. I was a child. when I did this.
Yes. And you are a grown man now.
Now I'm a grown adult.
You wrote a book called Yearbook.
Yes.
Which is getting a lot of promo here today.
Yes.
But this quote is not actually in this book.
Oh, no. I did not put that quote in that book.
So here you are.
Oh, yes.
Age 16, 17, something like that.
I wrote, ever since I started earning more than my own teachers, everything fell into perspective. I'm someone who grew up with no money, which was also a part of I had a real chip on my shoulder. I'm accepting of the fact that I may well never have another job, and in time may have to burn this very yearbook to keep warm. However, right now, if feeling good were a train, I'd be the engineer. I was probably very high when I wrote that.
It has a poetry to it.
It does have a, sir. You can see I was a good writer.
Yeah.
Even at that time.
If I was, I'd be the engineer.
Feeling good for a train, I'd be the engineer.
Just imagining you putting that on like your dating profile.
Yeah, exactly. Thank God I'm not single.
Okay. Why does that make you so embarrassed? Like,
It's just so silly.
You were a kid that like believed in themselves, though.
Yes, I was a kid who believed in themselves.
Is that embarrassing to you?
No, I'd say the swipe at my teacher's salaries is probably the thing that maybe I would rework were I to write that again today. But
Definitely tough for them.
It is.
You got paid what, $30,000 for Freaks and Geeks?
Something like that, yeah. But it's embarrassing in some ways, but I stand by it in others.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of Talk Easy is we want to make sure you stand by
the humiliating things I've done.
I don't know what they told you about this show. I actually found that one to be funny and two, kind of incredible in the way that when you're young and making stuff, in some ways you're more bold.
Oh, for sure. I was much more confident when I was younger. Like I had never failed, you know? I had an odd career. I mean, I failed in some ways, but like I think I took quality for granted. You know, I was very lucky in that like a lot of the first things I did just turned out well, and that doesn't always happen, you know?
But you know, even with that, Freaks and Geeks is fantastic.
Yeah.
But it was canceled.
It was canceled, which made me have a lot of, I think that's where some of the more critical parts of our view of networks and studios and things like that comes from, is my first foray into it. Yes, was, you know, was I did, you know, great work and everyone loved it and it was, you know, very well received. And then the head of the network just like didn't get it. And so he didn't support it and they kind of set it up to fail. And a lot of these things are self-fulfilling prophecies in a lot of ways, you know? And so, yeah, I also saw very quickly like how bad a bad executive can be, you know?
Did you find that demoralizing at the time? Or was it in some strange way liberating to know it's out of your control?
I found it like, I think it gave me like a chip on my shoulder that motivated me and probably wanted me to prove people wrong and probably gave me like an animosity that fueled me, you know? And I was a lot angrier back then at the industry in general because I wasn't successful, you know? And so
What did Seth with a lot of animosity look like?
I was like smoking weed on Jason Segel's couch, just kind of whining about everything and complaining I wasn't getting sent on the auditions he was getting sent on and getting sent the scripts he was getting sent, and that I was working so hard writing Superbad and Pineapple Express and I thought they were these great screenplays, and meanwhile I was like struggling to get auditions for things that I thought were so much worse than the stuff that I was writing, you know? And yeah, it was a lot of that. You were getting an earful of that if you were hanging out with me in 2003.
But that feeling of going, God, I'm working so hard at something and people just don't seem to give a shit.
Yeah. I still see it a lot. I know a lot of people who live with that on a day-to-day basis, you know?
How did you hold on?
Because there's no option to even quit if you're a movie person, I think.
It was too late.
It's too late. Like,
you already had the thing in the yearbook.
Yeah, exactly. How do you come back from that? And everyone's like that here. Or not everyone, but I'd say like the grand majority of people they're dedicated to trying. And I think they understand that if they get old and never made anything, that they will look back and know they tried and not know that they gave up. And I think that is a more comforting thought to many, many people, myself included, you know?
You said recently, I think movies are a good indicator of the culture. For example, like there was an era where they made Apocalypse Now and then Platoon critiqued the Vietnam War. And then the irony was stripped away, and it was just Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the jungle,
just blowing motherfuckers away.
So in that period of your early movies, though, like the 40-Year-Old Virgin, Superbad, Knocked Up. If you're thinking about movies as a cultural indicator, what do you think those signified?
I think it's signified like in some ways like a discomfort with how kind of outwardly masculine a lot of movie or in a way misogynistic a lot of movie narratives were becoming, you know what I mean? And I think growing up with those things and how sexualized they were and how comfortable everyone was with how sexualized they were, and I think as awkward guys who weren't that cool, we felt a lot of discomfort with that stuff, and so that's really like, when I look at those types of movies, to me, they really are like, and we loved American Pie when it came out, but I think Superbad in many ways is like the exact opposite of that movie. You know what I mean? Even though they're kind of about the same thing at face value, I think our attitude towards it is completely based on fear, whereas their attitude towards it is completely based on desire, you know? And it's the same thing with 4-Year-Old Virgin. Like, it's about a guy who's like afraid to have sex. And that is not who would have been the protagonist in it. You know, we grew up with like 10, like, you know, it's like all about how horny people. It's like their movies were like the theme is horny, you know, and I think,
and they're weirdly confident about it.
Yes, and they're very confident about it, and that was just not how we felt. And I think those movies really were like explorations in kind of coming away from those types of narratives, you know.
You didn't feel confident?
No. Not at all.
Did the movies doing well help you with being confident?
I mean, probably in some ways. Like, I think as a person who exists in Hollywood, like, I think it is, you know, I think with work it is one thing, like, but I don't know if it helped my moment-to-moment confidence, you know. And I've had moments where my career is going great and my personal confidence is not that high, and I've had moments where my career is not going that well and my personal confidence is pretty good. So I think there isn't as much of a correlation, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know, but for sure, when stuff is coming out, I feel more vulnerable, and if the stuff is received well, I'm definitely happier than I am if it's not, you know.
On the heels of all that, on the heels of that era of, I feel like pretty great success. Like, it went pretty well.
It went great.
I mean, it went about as well as it could go.
We had a really good run, yeah.
Movie-wise. I'm thinking about, like, leading into This Is the End.
Yeah.
Which is the first movie you and Evan directed.
Uh-huh.
I rewatched it the other week, and I was thinking, like, oh, this is a kind of precursor to The Studio in some ways.
For sure, yeah, definitely.
Hey, where are you at on that movie? Like, how do you think about it now?
I'm so proud of it. I think it's so funny. I'm amazed we pulled it off. It's one of those things, I look at it and I'm like, it's such a crazy idea that the fact that we...
Definitely Larry Sanders inspired.
For sure. And it's something me and Evan had joked about for a long time, because we also are like, we're fans of like genre. Like, we grew up loving horror movies and monster movies and very violent movies, and you know, and so the fact that we were able to really combine our love for, like, you know, meta commentary and kind of blurring the line between real and not real with like an incredibly crazy genre play, while also kind of being about religion and morality and friendship, you know, it's something that I'm very proud of, and I think it's and I'm so... It was so much fun to do, and it was a group of people that we had all come up together, and I think there was a sense as we were doing it, honestly, where we were like, this is maybe the last time we'll ever get to do something like this, and so we should really enjoy it and try to make it great, you know?
What do you mean by that?
It just, we could already feel like that we were also kind of going in different directions and kind of developing our own careers, and there was some sense of just like the odds that this happens again are small, you know?
Yeah. This like really was the end.
Mm-hmm.
And is that how it played out in the aftermath? I mean, friendship wise and creatively?
No, I still work with some of those people, and they still come around, and so no, it was.
But it felt like an end of an era of some kind.
It did a little bit. It felt like the end of this like raucous R-rated comedy era that we kind of had been part of ushering in, like the previous decade, basically, you know. And I could just see like Jonah was about to go be in Wolf of Wall Street, and McBride was doing his own shows, you know what I mean? And it did just feel like we were kind of going in our different directions. Everyone was just getting a little older and kind of developing new interests, and
People are having kids.
Exactly. And so it did feel like maybe like a good bookend to what we'd been doing together in some ways. Yeah.
It's amazing that you have a document of the end of the end of something.
Yeah.
It's like both your movie, but also in some ways a snapshot of where you all were at.
Yeah, and it was a very personal thing, and we thought a lot about that movie as we were writing this show, like Superbad felt like a definitive work of our teen years, and Pineapple Express felt like a definitive work of our 20s when we were just spending a lot of time sitting around smoking weed and not really maximizing our potential. And this is the end.
This is the complaining on Jason Segel's couch
exactly.
era. Yeah.
And this is the end felt like a very definitive representation of our 30s as far as we were becoming much more successful and famous, and our friend groups were going in different directions. People's priorities were shifting, and we were really we were outwardly exploring like what could be a definitive look at our 40s. And this idea was also born of that like thought process.
So in writing The Studio, it does feel like a spiritual sequel, I guess, to This Is the End, or at least there's some lineage between the two.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it just speaks to like our taste and creative sensibilities. Is like we just like things where that blur the line between the real world and the fictional world, the disconnect, or not the disconnect, but I guess the thing I'm fascinated by is after This Is the End, you make The Interview. Yep.
And there's this decade between the two. And you had this quote where you said, it was something that for sure we felt like we burned our hands on the stove. I don't think it's a coincidence that we haven't directed a film since.
Yeah, probably. We've tried. And we've had opportunities to as well. But we just haven't, Yeah.
But that film, you told Dave Chang this thing on his Netflix show that I thought was so good, where you're like, oh, in talking about the notes process as we have throughout, you're like, that one could have used
more scrutiny.
Do you still feel that way?
I mean, it is funny that I think it was one of the easiest paths we've had to production because we were kind of coming off this string of hits and do
you think you need that friction?
No, but I think something we say a lot is friction makes fire. And that has been a joke that me and Evan have said amongst each other, but is actually true in some ways when it comes to the creative process. I think, so I do think sometimes a longer path to production helps because someone second guesses everything at some point or another, and often that helps things. I don't know if we had waited longer, got more notes, if that movie wouldn't have started a war, but it's a fun thing to hypothesize.
That fallout was especially insane.
Mm-hmm. It was a lot, but I think the show also wouldn't have happened without that happening because it granted us access to this like whole upper level of studio bureaucracy that we would have never been exposed to otherwise.
Right.
We were all of a sudden with like the CEOs of the company, not the people who are running the day-to-day of the studio, and those are the people who are scary, and those are the people who actually don't care about movies and just care about money, and those are the people that we found to be terrifying.
Did you interview Michael Linton for this show?
I wish. I don't know if we're on speaking terms, but he's a scary, somebody who genuinely terrified me.
I have a feeling you may not be, and only for one reason, which is you do compare him to the devil in your book.
I do, yes, several times.
Famous.
He's also on the cover. I always think it's funny. Like, I wonder if he sees this book in bookstores and recognizes that he's on the cover of it. I hope he does.
People famously don't love that.
Yes,
when you're compared
to the devil.
Yeah, I think
it's like that joke in Crimes and Misdemeanors where Woody Allen's like, "You'd think no one had ever been compared to Mussolini before." I don't get what he's so mad about.
Speaking of Crimes and Misdemeanors, the Sony hacks of it all.
Yeah.
That's called a segue.
It's a good one.
Were you more upset about like the circus around it, or the fact that in the middle of the circus, people still went out of their way to talk about how they didn't like the movie?
That was far more offensive to me, for sure. From an ego standpoint, 100%.
Like Nick Kroll going to your charity event and saying, quote, "Your failure to wrangle James Franco's performance gave the whole movie tonal problems."
Exactly. That's a scathing indictment of the film itself and our abilities as a director. That's what do you say to that? And he's right. That's the worst part. I know he's right.
Look, we brought up some embarrassing...
I might have wrote that joke.
Really?
Maybe.
It did seem a little neat for Nick Kroll.
A little pointed.
Well, I get on the other side of that. I know I've been doing bits, and I'm happy to keep doing bits, but I've emotionally that first quote of like we were kind of gun shy after that.
Yeah.
I sense like emotionally and ego wise, you were a little wounded. You're a little like, oh God,
for sure.
We tried really hard to make something, and
no one liked it.
Yeah,
and some people really didn't like it.
I actually kind of like it, so I don't.
No, and I think I haven't revisited it, honestly, and people do like it, and actually I'm amazed.
We're gonna screen it for you right after
exactly.
this.
I'm amazed and grateful at how many people actually come up to me and Evan telling us how much they love the movie, which is very lovely, you know. And I think since its release, it has sort of found more fans, you know.
Oh, you pointed to me again.
Exactly. You're one of them, kind of. So I think... Kinda. You said you kind of liked it.
Well, look, it's not my favorite.
Exactly. It's not mine either.
No, I have tastes. You've made better things, but I do like it.
There's funny parts. Yeah. But I think it's something that, was something... Yeah, it's very hurtful. I think the combination of things were a bummer, that it was so much in the spotlight and it was not being viewed as our best work. And I think that was...
And people were reading some of your emails.
Exactly. That I was honestly, I was much less embarrassed about that than the fact that like people were just like outwardly shitting on the quality of it, you know? Like truthfully, that's really mostly what I care about, is I just want the work to be good and to be able to stand by it, you know? And so I honestly, the thing that was the most wounding was that it was like the butt of the joke, you know?
The year before you made This Is the End, and you thought this is kind of the end of an era.
Yeah.
And then the next year you made The Interview, and it was like, no, this is definitely the end.
No, this is the end of an era. No, this is the end.
You guys were telling yourselves it was the end in This Is the End, and the world was like...
It should have been the end. Honestly, and one of the most frustrating things is like The Interview was going to do well. Like it was tracking very well. It was going, even before any of that stuff, it was tracking to be one of our more successful movies. And that was also... very, like, you know, a hit movie is a thing that is like, you could make movies your whole life and never have a movie be successful. And so that was also something that was like stripped from us in a way that at the time was very like hurtful and damaging. Was like, we were going to have a hit movie. And that's also a good revenge when people don't think the movie's good, is at least it makes money sometimes and you're able to rub that in their faces. But we weren't given that opportunity.
But at least you got to come on this podcast 10 years later.
You know what? And gesture towards you freely.
So how do you and Evan find your way back to confidence and, you know, not feeling wounded and ready to write again?
I mean, we'd been writing the whole time also, you know, we were helping to write a lot of the stuff we were developing and producing, like, but we just didn't have an idea until the show that felt like it was the thing we should really try to put all of ourselves behind.
Right.
And
for you to star in.
Yeah. And one of the things we ask ourselves when we're going to direct something is like, you know, we're very fortunate that we have access to a lot of great directors for our work. And we're like, are we the only people who could direct this thing? And that was really clear on This Is the End, is we were like, no one will do this unless we're directing it. And that became a similar thing with the studio, where it was like, we felt that like, in order to actually do what we wanted, we had to be the ones to direct it. And so it was also the first idea in a long time that we felt like we were the only ones who could do it. Like, we were going to direct the pilot for The Boys, but we were asking ourselves that question. We were like, are we the only people who could direct this? And we were friends with Dan Trachtenberg, who's a great director. And we were like, honestly, he could probably do it better than us. And if he is willing to do it, then we'll step away and he should do it. And if he isn't willing to do it, then we will do it. And he said he was willing to do it and he was enthusiastic about it. So like, that was like a prime example to us. And it worked out very well of being like, of using that level of scrutiny, is like, if there's anyone else we can imagine would be better at this, we should let them do it,
I want to talk about writing for a second. Like, you and Evan start writing at 13.
Yeah.
And the two of you worked very much in real time. It was like, in Superbad, it wasn't remember when that happened. It was, this just happened today.
Yeah.
We're putting this in the movie. And a lot of the work that you two made and were part of came out of that. I mean, your friend Will Reiser and his story turned into 50/50.
Yeah.
For the memoir yearbook, you interviewed old classmates and spoke to them about the experience. For the studio, you're interviewing studio heads. You're, talking to executives. It's very lived in.
Yeah.
I guess as the two of you have gotten older, I think for most people, as they get older, their world does get smaller. And the majority of your time now is spent working on projects, writing, producing, house plant, your company, all of this. Like, when your world gets smaller like that, is it harder to write about lived experiences? Are there just less of them?
I think it's what we're aiming for,
right? But
it's not the only thing we pull from, and we like Ninja Turtles is not based on our lived experience, you know what I mean? But it is something we spent a huge amount of time writing, right. and we knew we could make a good coming of age story that wasn't based directly on us. You know what I mean?
That would have been incredible if it came out and you're like, this is our most personal project to date.
And it is very personal in many ways, but it isn't based on us explicitly. You know what I mean? And so you don't always, we developed The Boys, Preacher, all these shit. Like they were not very based on our personal experience. They were just things we loved and things that we would love, knew we would be fans of if they were out in the world. So there are two categories of thing, I think, to me and Evan, which is like the highly personal thing and the thing that just
springs from imagination.
Yeah, and the thing that as movie lovers or TV lovers, we would just be thrilled if someone else made that, and we would get to watch it. So why not be the ones who are making it? You know?
Does weed help with the writing? Because I know I look like someone who smoked before I look like the kid from Dazed and Confused.
A little bit. You need to touch your face more.
I usually do. Thank you for pointing that out. We're on camera, so I'm trying not to.
You're doing good.
People complain about the similarities. They're angry about it.
Wiley Wiggins.
I'm Wiley Wiggins. I asked that because in this book, you have this line. I finished the book a few days ago, and it's just like stayed with me. And you wrote, unfortunately, as well-designed as people are, we just aren't completely cut out for this world we live in. We need shoes, sunblock, exercise, toilet paper, and weed. I'm not quite cut out for this world, but weed makes it okay.
Yeah, I think it's like...
I know people always ask you about weed, but I think I want to ask you about it in like the way in which you're actually writing about it in a sincere way. Like, I'm not asking, like, I don't care about how many joints you have. I just am like, you writing that, I don't know, moved me. Like, I'm like that feeling of not feeling cut out for this world.
Yeah, and it's not a feeling that I hold a lot of stigma like towards, you know what I mean? And I think that's something else I talk about is like people are very selective as to like what they stigmatize, you know? And the idea that we're not cut out for this world is common commonly accepted, as is evidenced by the many accoutrements we need to get by in the day-to-day world, you know what I mean? And the many external things that we use to help us navigate the world, you know? And so to
Actually,
me...
this outfit's pretty good. I would say
Thank
this
you.
feels like someone cut out for this role.
Yes, exactly. I feel I'm pretty cut out, and you know, because I got weed. And I think that, you know,
You couldn't choose the clothes this
No,
morning
it'd be impossible
until you took a hit.
But I think in general, yeah, like no, you know, everyone needs things to get through the day, and if weed is one of those things, I don't view. I think people are very weird about their brains as well. That's like
Right.
something I've found in general is, you know. People are uncomfortable with mental health and talking about that kind of thing and accepting that maybe your brain could use some help as your feet or eyes or hands can when it's cold, you know? And to me, that just isn't a thing I'm uncomfortable
You're
with.
not uncomfortable with.
Yeah. And it's a thing that I just fully recognize in myself, you know, and a thing I stopped really thinking a lot about 20 years ago, you know? Yeah.
And when you testified before Congress,
Yeah.
you called yourself a self-medicated man-child.
You know, I'm going for laughs, but yeah.
It got laughs.
Yeah.
Getting laughs in that building.
Try to get, you know, you do what you can.
is tough. Have you found weed to be the best medicine for your brain? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, and sometimes no weed is the best medicine for my brain. Like, I actually find weed does the exact opposite as a lot of people think. Is like, if I'm anxious, weed does not help. Like, weed makes me more anxious
100%.
if I'm very anxious. And I actually smoke much more weed when I'm just kind of happy and relaxed than I do if I'm stressed out about something, you know?
I have a bad response.
Yes.
If I'm anxious.
It doesn't help me particularly when I'm anxious, you know? And so, but for me, it's, I for whatever reason, just always something I've enjoyed and gravitated towards, and I never found that it was impairing what I was trying to do or impeding my goals or creating some sort of disconnect between what I was attempting to express and what I was actually expressing, and I didn't find it muted my emotions or anything like that, you know. I wish it would at times, but it does not. And I just, for whatever reason, I just stopped thinking about it eventually. Just as one stops being critical of themselves for not having feet that don't need cushioning beneath them, you know.
What at this point, you know, bringing us back to this new show.
Nice, another segue. When I did stand up, I had a joke when I was young where I would be like, I was writing a segue the other day, and then I happened like I was sitting there working on a segue, and I ran into a guy.
In the show, Matt has a lot of anxieties that are very on the surface and big.
Yes.
When you say you wish we'd muted some of those, what is that for you? Because you don't strike me as someone that has, like, it's not on the surface the way it is for Matt and your character.
No, I hide it much better. I'm a much better actor than Matt is. And that was a very specific trait that I wanted to reflect is I've worked with a lot of executives over the years who have bad poker faces.
Right.
And who you see every ounce of anguish, you know, oozing through their pores. And it doesn't even look like they're trying to hide it, you know?
And you're saying your poker face is good.
I'm much better at suppressing and concealing my emotions.
But at what cost?
Yes, exactly. I don't know. I do have this thing growing onto my back. Yeah.
Yeah, we are doing this on video, but we do have a shirts on policy.
Yes, exactly. Is there a dermatologist?
I guess what I'm asking is, are you all right?
Mostly. I'd say I'm mostly all right.
And what's the hang up at this point? Things have gone as well as they possibly could, at least from here.
True. Yeah, no, I agree. It's just, you know, being a person's tough.
A pain in the ass.
You know, it's a pain in the ass for everyone. And I have a much better version of it than a lot of people, but it's still a pain in the ass sometimes. Yeah. I'm getting older. My body is doing weird things. You know, I think all that is, you know, it's a lot to shoulder at times.
We did go to the bathroom together.
Exactly. You saw.
Speaking of things changing, The film industry is going through it. We talked about it in the beginning. I want to bring us back to the show.
Great.
What does it say about the industry that you and Evan have made a TV show on Apple about the love of movies, about a love of movies, instead of a movie about the love of movies?
I mean, I think it speaks for itself that I think unfortunately, in this exact moment we are living in Hollywood, in order to we could have made a movie about it. It would not have been as well resourced as the show. It would not have been as well supported as the show. It's, and honestly, we conceived of it as a TV show, but I think it does speak to how things shift and they ebb and they flow. And right now you have TV, these streaming services are trying to build up their libraries and build up their programming and lure people to their services. And as a result, they're taking a lot of big risks and they're making a lot of things that are, things that major studios wouldn't take the same bets on in this moment, and that is reflective of the industry. But to me, again, in real life, it's not a thing that I am like incredibly bent out of shape about. It's a thing that we acknowledge and we play into it, but it's not lost on us. Like we understand how ironic that is, but at the same time, it was the best way to tell the story that we wanted to tell.
Do you think you're not incredibly bent out of shape
in general?
No, in particular about that, because you had a pretty good swing at it.
Yeah, and I don't mind.
I mean, you guys got to make those movies.
Yes, for sure. And I think we will again.
I got to grow up with them. I loved them.
I don't think it's going to stop.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I genuinely don't.
You think the doomerism stuff about Hollywood is overblown? I
totally do. And I think one movie changes the whole climate of the industry. And people are like, this kind of movie is never going to do well again. And then one comes out and does well, and everyone's like, oh, never mind, they will. Like, I think that things shift, and it's a very fluid industry, but I think some people are always trying to define it, but it's a hard thing to define, and that's something that I think me and Evan are sort of try to be at peace with rather than trying to wrangle, and that I think is what leads to us being like, oh, we have this idea. Seems like TV's where they'll let us do this. Okay, we'll make it into a TV show. Oh, we want to make this kind of movie. We got to call it Ninja Turtles. Okay, we'll call it Ninja Turtles. Like that to us isn't like, it's fine, and some people hate that and they really rage against it. But we don't, because we understand that I've seen so many trends coming. We saw, superhero movies that weren't a thing. Now they're a thing. Will they only be the biggest? There was a point where, like, I'm sure in people in the early 60s were like, Westerns. Like, if it's not a Western, no one wants to see it. And now it's not like that anymore, and there was a moment with the Yellowstone and stuff where it kind of was like that again. Yeah. And then it went away again,
Then there was a pandemic.
Exactly. And so we've just seen that these things come and go, and I do think there will be movies like the ones we made that come out and capture the attention of the culture again. I just think today is not that day, but in 3 months it could happen. In
2020, when pessimism was at an all-time high,
yeah,
where you and Evan felt like, oh boy,
is this over?
Is this over?
Yeah.
Your company would do a virtual film club.
Yeah.
And one of the films you all watched was Y Tu Mama Tambien.
Uh-huh.
And you somehow, speaking of wrangling,
yeah,
got Alfonso Cuarón to come on the Zoom and talk about his experience with the movie and his experience with the industry at large.
Yes.
Do you remember that back and forth?
Very much so. I mean, it was amazing. And actually, it was very inspirational as to how we shot the show in a lot of ways.
Children of Men and the tracking shots.
Children of Men and the tracking shot. And Y Tu Mama Tambien has a lot of tracking shots, and a lot of the scenes are actually singular takes,
That's why I'm bringing it in here.
And I remember he was saying that him and his cinematographer, Chivo, was they had made a lot of films together, and they were like, let's just kind of throw everything out the window and kind of just do this as though we were doing whatever the fuck we wanted, basically, and not subscribe to the formalities of filmmaking and what we know is, the rudimentary way to make a movie and the list of things you check off as you're putting a scene together. How would we do this? We just knew nothing about making movies, and we were just kind of capturing it, and that's something that was very inspirational to me and Evan, and we came up in a very specific way of capturing comedy, especially, and hearing him say that was really exciting, and it's one of our favorite movies, and so this idea of like, oh, like let's try something similar, both in its ethos and in its literal sense. In what if we kind of just shot this in a way that was completely different how we'd ever done anything, and was really kind of throwing all the rules we understood out the window.
Yeah.
And also the idea of doing long singular takes, we felt really added to like the narrative of the show, which was like one of panic and stress and uneasiness, and
the hits.
All the hits.
You brought in Adam Newport-Barra,
yeah,
the cinematographer, to do that.
Yeah.
Very talented.
He's great guy. Yes, unbelievable dude.
Did you find making comedy in that framework challenging?
Yes, but in a great way. Like,
not a ton of coverage.
No coverage ever. Like, I mean, it was it literally is. We were pointing at the camera at whoever was talking, basically, and also trying to recreate kind of cinematic moments, or create cinematic moments within that.
The show should come with Dramamine, but that's
yes, exactly. In a theater, it's a lot, but yeah, like we also wanted there to be wide shot, like, we didn't want to be all like the camera in people's faces. We wanted there to be wide shots, beautiful shots, and tracking shots, things that found the characters, things that came from, narratively set the scenes in different ways, but the comedy especially is hard because comedy, I'm sure as you know, is like all about timing. And the thing you probably manipulate the most in the editing room is the timing of things, and they say comedy's all about timing, though.
I was gonna do a bit that was awkwardly placed.
That was the joke.
I wanted to, but I felt the level of sincerity coming from you.
Always do the joke. Comedy's all about timing. So yeah, but to me that was all. It was part of the challenge, but it was also part of what I was hoping the cast and myself could pull off. And I think that these singular takes are also kind of a shorthand for showcases in ability in some ways. Like if there's a fight scene that's done all in one take, like what you take away from it is hopefully not only like the narrative desired impact, but you're like, wow, this is impressive. It's impressive that these people are able to do that. And I like the idea of showcasing the comedic abilities of the people on the show in that way, in a way where they, in the moment, were forced to create the rhythms that you are used to seeing as the finished product of a comedy. And I had a deep fear for the first few weeks of shooting that I was in some way sacrificing the comedy. And because it was just so different from how we normally did things, I was so worried that I knew the scripts were good and people were really responding to them and they were really funny scripts. And my fear was that we made the stylistic choice that was undercutting the comedy rather than bolstering it. And
the timing would be.
Yeah. Or just like, would
off.
It be better if we just say, exactly. You did it. Would it be better if we just shot it normal is what I kept kind of saying to Evan. It's like, should we just be shooting this normal? And he was like, no, you're crazy. You're insane. Evan has, for wherever I lack confidence, Evan makes up for it, which is, I think, a good part of our dynamic.
Well, it's that dynamic I want to end with.
Yeah.
Because we have to go.
Great.
So this is my last question.
Let's do it.
After that decade, in that decade between the interview and the studio.
Yeah.
Where you two were making other things, but certainly not your project.
Uh-huh.
And you had to find your way back.
Yeah.
And it was in part Quaron who helped you find your way back to making something with that youthful spirit.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you had thought, with the two of you, like the first film you two wrote, Superbad, feels kind of like a more crass younger version or prequel to Y Tu Mama También.
Yeah, in some ways, for sure.
And I'm thinking about like the parallel final scenes, them in the diner,
Yeah,
Evan and Seth in the mall,
yeah.
on the escalator going in opposite directions.
Yeah, definitely.
You and Evan, your brains like have formed around working together.
Yes.
What does that look like after nearly 30 years?
It is our 30-year anniversary this year. We keep saying we should throw a party or something like that.
Yes. This is a prequel. This is a prequel to the party.
It honestly probably looks shockingly similar to how it always looked. Like I think we've gotten much better at it, honestly, over the years. We worked out some kinks. I think when we were younger, we would have more issues with one another's kind of working habits and styles at times. We have a very similar work ethic, and I think that has been very helpful to us. Is that like neither of us is the lazy one, or neither of us is the one who isn't as passionate about the thing as the other one is, you know? And neither of us feels that though less work needs to go into a thing in order for it to be great. Like we're very aligned as to what we feel is necessary in order to make something work in the way that we want it to. And we're also, our taste is essentially the same. And I know we picture the stuff the same as we're talking about it, which is also like a rare thing as we are talking about the tone of the scenes and the episodes and the jokes. Like I just know we're picturing literally the exact same thing. So that's also very helpful, you know, but it's not lost on us. Like we both feel very fortunate and grateful that we have a dynamic that's lasted so long that we still enjoy hanging out with each other. We went, you know, we go to dinner, we see each other socially still. We go on trips together, you know, like we still actually like hanging out together, which is also not always how this goes, you know what I mean? So it's something we don't take it for granted. And we know a lot of teams who have been together like as long as we have that have broken up over the years. And so we see that it can happen and we're happy it hasn't happened to us.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad it hasn't happened to you too.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
And at the risk of getting too sentimental, I just want to thank you for shaping in good ways and negative ways some of my childhood.
No problem. My pleasure. And I'm sorry. My pleasure, and I apologize.
And most importantly, I hope it's not a decade in between the next thing.
Me too. That'd be great. That'd be lovely.
Seth Rogen, thank you for the time.
Thank you for having me.